Hello everyone. Today we are going to see about sources of food contamination. What is a contaminated food? A food which becomes harmful to consume or which causes any symptoms or disease after consumption is called contaminated food. Contamination comes through biological sources, chemical sources, physical sources, and we know biological sources mainly include bacteria, mold, fungus, parasites, viruses, and other toxins, while chemical contaminations are through product chains like the products that the chemicals we use to grow the raw products or uh, process the products. That's how chemical contamination gets through the food chain. And physical contamination is accidental contamination of objects such as hair, nails, or any other physical objects like pen, dust, which is due to employee carelessness. These are the common food contamination sources. And food contamination, when a person eats a contaminated food, these are the they have certain symptoms like diarrhea, fever, abdominal pain, bloating, vomiting, dehydration. So we get to know that they have eaten or consumed contaminated food. So the food industry is a vast area because it starts from right when the raw product is produced and it is transported to the processing industry, and it is processed, cooked, served, and again transported if necessary. So because of this extensive nature of the food industry, uh, food gets contaminated easily, and there are a variety of sources. So let's talk about contamination through air. So mostly air, respiratory disease causing pathogens are spreaded because respiratory pathogens transfer by air, and from air it can contaminate the food. So respiratory, if an employee is infected by any respiratory infection causing pathogen, he or she might talk or communicate with another employee or cough, sneeze, or any other thing like that. So through that, droplet nuclei or aerosols or something, that solid particles which are suspended on liquid or gas. So in air it is suspended as solid particle, and these pathogens stick onto these aerosols and is suspended in the air. So the respiratory infection causing pathogens spread among both employees, and it can spread directly onto the food. These aerosols can settle down on food when the food is not stored properly, or during processing, or it is not closed or handled properly. So this is how contamination through air occurs. And if the infrastructure of the industry is not good, the walls have sporulating molds, and these spores may lead to trouble in cheese, meat, sweetened condensed milk, sliced bread, and bacon. So if a food have this number of microorganisms, that may vary based on the number of microorganisms in air when it is exposed to the food. So spoilage of microorganisms, these microorganisms present in air may interfere with the ones that is involved in food fermentation, because food fermentation is majorly done by microorganisms. Droplets of moisture. So sources include droplets of moisture from coughing, sneezing, and talking, growths of sporulating molds on walls, ceilings, floors, food and ingredients. And when we talk about industries, the air around industrial plants manufacturing yeast is high in yeast because they use yeast manufacturing. And air around dairy product plant contain bacteriophages or the starter bacteria such as lactobacillus, bacillus, to produce fermented food products or like yogurt, curd. So bacteriophages and the starter bacteria are common, very high in the area of dairy products industries. So treatment of air. Filtration is done by passing the air through fibers of example like cotton or fiberglass or carbonated material. So air is allowed to pass through these filters, and after passing through this filter, the filtered air enters into the industry. Chemical treatment is the passage of air And for physical treatment involves the passage of air through tunnels or an enclosed chamber lined with ultraviolet lamps. And after passing through the ultraviolet lamps, sterilized air or contaminant-free air passes out. So this is a common method. And heat treatment of air at a very high temperature. It is very simple as that. And it is a very common procedure, but it is very cost efficient, very costly. So industries think to use this method. And electrostatic precipitation is the is a filtration method by means of an electrostatic precipitator. It works by allowing to pass the air through a negatively charged electrode. So when the air passes through these negatively charged electrodes, the particles in the air take up the negative charge and continue to pass through the electrostatic precipitator. At the end of the electrostatic precipitator, there are some oppositely charged plates, that is positively charged plates. So our negatively charged particles gets attracted to the positively charged plate, and there is also a collecting plate which collects the particles that are attached to the positively charged collecting plate. So when air gets out of electrostatic precipitator, it is a contaminant free, and it is a very efficient method for the treatment of air. And washing is just by means of a water spray or bubbling air through water. So simply we are washing any aerosols are present. If any aerosols are present in air, we wash it by water spray. So next one, contamination through sewage. Sewage is just wastewater. When untreated domestic sewage is used as fertilizer, that is sewage sludge, or raw plant foods get contaminated with human pathogens. So the main route of contamination through sewage is the direct use of wastewater for irrigation and waste sludge to sludge as a manure. So these infections are the contamination through sewage is mainly caused due to gastrointestinal disease causing pathogens. In addition, we have coliform bacteria, anaerobes, enterococci, viruses which can contaminate the food through sewage. So natural waters also get contaminated with sewage, can contribute to fish product contamination through sewage, like shellfish and fish and other seafood. How food gets contaminated. So like I said, wastewater irrigation is a main source how sewage gets into the food chain. So people from rural areas who don't have much knowledge on these things, they use the wastewater for irrigation purpose, and because they don't have any resources, so they use wastewater irrigation. So the pathogens are directly introduced into the food chain. So direct contact is when if the industry have any leakages, so the sewage can seep into the food or gets contaminated through any leakage present in the industries. So sewage sludge is another use of sludge for irrigation purposes. So they use it as a manure, and if any pathogen is present in there, it gets directly contaminates the raw food materials. And cross contamination is when it enters through the infection causing pathogen enters through an employee's carelessness. If he or she doesn't follow any personal hygiene and does not wear any personal protective equipments and run off from contaminated areas. If any the contaminated areas, if a heavy rain is there, the water may run off from there and enter into agricultural lands and contaminate the plants and food materials. So prevention and mitigation. To prevent this, we have to follow proper wastewater treatment. Industries must follow proper wastewater treatment and release the wastewater only after the treatment to prevent any contamination or any release of pathogen. So people can use these properly treated wastewater for irrigation. Safe irrigation practices. So we can use treated wastewater for irrigation, or we can completely avoid wastewater for irrigation. So it is safe that we completely avoid the wastewater for irrigation. And good hygiene practices, employees should strictly follow good hygiene practices during food handling, processing and preparation. So they have to wash their hands properly, they have to wear their personal protective equipments, and the infrastructure should be maintained properly. Without, we have to check for any leakages around the pipes, or through anything, and we should check if the water sources or not water sources is contaminated with sewage or any wastewater. So we have to monitor and regulate it. And contamination through plants. So we all know that fruits, vegetables and plants naturally have microorganisms on their surfaces. These pathogens, these microorganisms, as time goes by, they produce enzymes and they start to degrade it. So we have to other than this, pathogens of enteric types which can present in soil, or untreated sewage can contaminate the plants or the raw food materials. So plants are subjected to or susceptible to pathogens, because they can pathogens can enter the plants through various sources. Like they can enter because plants are exposed to air, water, soil, sewage, everything. So a plant can get contaminated through these sources. Food can be contaminated by plant through pathways including soil, water and air. So microorganisms, heavy metals, pesticides and other contaminants can be absorbed by plants and subsequently enter the food chain. And if we consume that food, we are subjected to health issues. So microorganisms, from soil and water, bacteria like Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria can enter the plant. Seed contamination. When a seed is contaminated, pathogens directly transmitted into developing plants, and the raw food materials that we produce is also contaminated. Harvesting, packaging and storage, we have to be very careful in these areas, because harvesting, packaging and storage uh, is a very sensitive side, where many microorganisms can easily enter the food chain. And fungi produces certain toxins, we know that as mycotoxins. And these mycotoxins can enter the food chain, which can be deadly. And other contaminants include pesticides, microplastics, heavy metals from industries. So prevention and control, good agricultural practices. We have to follow, like less usage of sewage water, properly using manure, pesticides, etc., and proper sanitation. Before using the raw products, you have to clean it and do any other treatment if necessary. And cooking the products, no matter how careful we are, we should use the vegetables or fruits, or we should cook it so that any microorganism if present will get killed. So monitoring and sanitation, regularly monitoring the plants and the raw materials, and sanitation is very crucial in maintaining food products. So contamination through animals. Food contamination by animal can occur through various pathways, including animal waste, contaminated feed, and during slaughter and processing. So contamination can produce pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli, Campylobacter into the food chain. These are the common microorganisms that enter the food chain through animals. Animal waste, direct and indirect contamination. So if we use water, the cooking water can be directly contaminated by animal waste. Or indirect contamination include through employees, the transfer of microorganisms through employees. And contaminated food, bacterial contamination, feed and processing impact on animal health. The fodder we use to feed the animals like cow, chicken, the meat products we use can directly enter the if the animal eats the fodder, it takes up the microorganisms, and when we eat it, we get affected by the microorganisms. So during slaughter and processing is the most important part of animal meat processing, because animal fur and animal skin has many microbes that are pathogens, so we have to properly remove it, and handling should be done very properly. And during slaughtering, the intestinal contents have more microorganisms, so we have to completely remove the intestines and should be very careful in removing those intestines. And poultry, eggs most commonly transmit salmonella, because salmonella is a normal microflora of hen. And when we take up the egg, we have to make sure that we clean it properly, and use any other antiseptic materials like turmeric, like for use of chicken or anything. We can wash it with turmeric, so that any other microorganisms present gets killed. And cross contamination is from, like I said, from animal skin or fur to the meat we buy. And for prevention, we can use hygiene practices, that is using proper animal feed and maintaining the infrastructure of the animal growing environment, and proper cooking and storage. Proper cooking is the best method to prevent any contamination of food. And storage is also very necessary, because raw meat storage should be done at freezing temperature. And cross contamination prevention through employees and slaughtering units. And animal feed safety is very important, because using of proper animal feed can prevent the contamination. So thank you.